Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing okay today. Let me check my volume. Guys, if you like what I'm throwing down, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always help out the content. Keep ticking along with the Patreon or Super Chat. Let's hop across the pond. Here's the thing. I know sometimes when you're watching something like Parliament or some kind of governmental process like C-SPAN, it's hard to fully grasp the epic forces that are taking place sometimes when these people are making their motions. Sometimes they seem stiffy and everything else. British Parliament doesn't seem stiffy though. My wife loves it. She's like, hey, the back, when somebody makes a point. It looks funny sometimes. But what they're talking about right now could not be more epic. I guess it could be more epic if they were like aliens or something like that and Britain was under attack and you were trying to, all that, yes. But just basic human real world scenarios. Britain has decided to leave the European Union. This is going to fundamentally change the face of Europe, what Europe is going to look like. And there are going to be forces at work when Britain pulls away. Britain could potentially be the canary in the coal mine, with Slovenia and Italy getting Eurosceptic governments. You've heard me make this argument before that trying to put down one issue sometimes create other issues that you can't necessarily quell. I mean, after all, they were able to put down Greece from the standpoint of we can put our thumb down on Greece. But you sent shockwaves through the rest of the societies when they see you repress the will of another government. You created your monsters. Again, you created your monsters. You could have helped Greece. You decided not to. You decided to put your boot down on it. Well, you have consequences. One of those consequences is assertion of nationalistic fervor in some of these places. I've heard the left-leaning argument is a left-wing government was elected in Greece, and was not able to implement the strategies that they wanted to in their particular society. Oh my God, if we want to get anything accomplished, we need to leave. Now, putting that to the side for the moment. Right now, Britain, this has been an epic choice. And they've been having multiple conversations in the standpoint of Parliament and votes recently that, again, have been somewhat epic. They've been having a ping-pong match between Commons and the House of Lords over what type of Brexit would take place. Now, the government is in crisis to some degree. I mean, ultimately, you have these Brexiteers and you have these groups that are more pro-Remainer. And these guys, just like the public itself, completely divided. But divided along closely equal lines, with the catch being the referendum, meaning the public will said, leave. We're leaving. We're getting out. We're going. Now, the public didn't quite know what it was voting for, but that's kind of besides the point. It voted to leave. And the government that's in place is trying to take it out. Now, just because the government voted to leave doesn't necessarily mean you don't have forces that are in the country that are trying to keep it there, that make it stay, that's not necessarily accepting the will of the public, and is one or two things, either softening the Brexit or stopping Brexit altogether. Those forces exist. George Soros is one of them. That rat bastard doesn't even live in the UK, and yet he's exerting force within the UK. I think he has like a home or something. Look, my point in this is, there's a meta-narrative that's taking place that goes beyond the things people say. You have certain factions of the government that want to stay, that are more inclined to be in the EU. You have other factions that want to leave, that are hard Brexiteers. Theresa May is in this quagmire between the two, trying to step between the daisies and the raindrops as she go about trying to take the government through tough negotiations. One of the things that came up, one of the, you can say, landmarks, or one of the ways that the Remainers have tried to essentially stymie the government, regardless of what they say. They would say, we just want democracy and all this other stuff, but ultimately what they wanted to do was stymie the government. They wanted to create a pretext or a condition based on logic-sounding things or reasonable sounding arguments that would allow a condition to which they could stop Brexit. Now, this ended up being a fight over what was called the meaningful vote. Now, I'm going to read what this was instead of me just trying to explain it, but ultimately, well, if at the end of the deal, meaning at the end of what the government negotiates, the British Parliament is going to get a yes or no vote. If they vote no, meaning after X number of years of negotiations, they come to a deal and the government says, yeah, we hate that deal. That's a horrible deal. We're not going to accept that deal. Parliament says no. Then, instead of doing a hard Brexit, Parliament wants to be able to negotiate what's next. What's next might be, hey, let's stay in the EU. The government says, no, we don't want you to have that capacity. Giving you that capacity will weaken our hand in negotiations. Meaning, giving you that power gives it more likely that the Remainers may, working in tandem with let's say the political aspirations of the people in the EU, keep Britain in the Union. Or maybe not even keep Britain in the Union, weaken Britain's hand in negotiations. This is the argument that the Tories are making. That allowing you that vote at the end of the process, a vote that may actually be able to stop Brexit, weakens our hand in the political process. I don't necessarily know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I fully buy that. Maybe I buy that. I mean, at the end of the day, you tend to like all of your options to be on the table, and you don't necessarily want to allow your partner, the person you're going against, your competitor, to know that for the most part, your government may choose a different option if you make the deal shitty enough. Like, if we can make this deal so horrific and so bad, they may choose to either stay or they may choose something else. And it's this kind of soft Brexit where we have this kind of regulatory alignment, which is not a Brexit at all. Theresa May's government's point was, if you allow this, you allow our opponent to know limits of sorts, and we want to know that a hard Brexit is on the table. This terrified the hell out of a lot of people because a hard Brexit was not something they wanted. But the government is not necessarily saying that's what we're going for. It's just that's what may be on the table. Now, if it's up for the point of a hard Brexit or no deal, like, let me explain what I mean. Say for the moment you get to the end of the process, the government says, fine, no deal, and leaves. Theresa May caters to the hard Brexiteers. Well, you have some people in the House of Lords and some of the Remainers says, whoa, we don't want you to be able to just no deal it. We want to get a meaningful vote at the end of this process. If you can't figure out a way to come up with a deal, and if Parliament votes no, we want a meaningful vote. We don't want you to be able to just go without anything. Put it up for a vote. Theresa May said no. Now, the catch is, it is possible that Theresa May could have lost this vote, which is an important point. She wasn't strong enough to essentially face these people down without giving in. She made a concession. She made, in fact, 2 concessions. So let me read the technical part of it, just to make sure I explain this correctly. The amendment drafted by Tory rebel Dominic Grieve had been passed in the House of Lords and become something of a sticking point between the House of Parliament. MPs voted against the amendment on Wednesday, the last outstanding rebel roadblock. But the result only came after Prince Minister Theresa May offered a significant concession. What is the meaningful vote all about? What the Tory rebels wanted was an assurance that if the final negotiation fell apart, and the government walks away with no deal, MPs will be given a vote on what to do next. What they're scared of is Theresa May just saying, screw it, no deal, let's just go out into the market and see what happens. They want to get a meaningful vote in the process. They don't want her to be able to conclude negotiations without referring to Parliament. The meaningful vote would allow Parliament to take charge of the negotiating strategy if the vote against the government's Brexit deal in autumn. if they vote against the Brexit deal in autumn. Meaning, they get a Brexit deal, they bring it to Parliament. Parliament says, no, we don't like the deal that you have worked out with the EU. Then they get a deal. They get to figure out something else afterwards. Theresa May can't just make a decision on what to do. They have to come to Parliament for a choice. The amendment, if it was passed, would essentially have given MPs the power to stop Britain from leaving the EU. It was defeated 319 to 303. This is what I mean when I say the Remainers. The meta-narrative to this is, we want more power to potentially stop this. And regardless of what they coded this in, if they would have lost this, the government, if they would have lost this, that would have given somebody else the power to stop this, meaning the power would have no longer have been in government's hands itself. That's assuming if there was no deal. Or assuming that Parliament didn't like the deal. And understand the problem with this. Assume for the moment you have enough people in Parliament that are on the Remain side. They don't want to go anywhere. And then Theresa May comes back with a deal that's somewhat horrendous. And you have just enough of her bench that's willing to give in that essentially blocks it. The moment that it's blocked, you may have enough of a coalition that says, you know what, we're staying. Let's stop this process. In which case you can essentially bypass the referendum altogether. Will they do this? I don't know. I do know you have a bunch of money behind this idea of trying to remain. That's what I do know. I do know you have some people trying to push Corbyn into the Remain camp. And you do have some people who are in the Tory benchers, the rebels, that are pushing for Remain. Following the Commons vote, the Lords accepted the government's new proposal without a vote. The leader of the Lords, Baroness Evans of Bowes, well, actually, explain what it was. Let's go down to the concessions. The most significant and meaningful concession came in the form of a written statement from Brexit Secretary David Davis underlying the role of the Speaker and the Parliament. Mr. Greaves said he had insisted on a key paragraph in the statement saying the government is open to MPs to table motions and to debate matters of concern, and that, and is the convention, parliamentary time would be provided for this. The other significant concession was that there would be no physical infrastructure on the Irish border without parliamentary approval. That gives MPs a veto over future trading relationship with the EU as it affects Northern Ireland. So Greaves didn't necessarily get what he wanted. Meaning he didn't necessarily get this ability to have a vote at the end if the government itself, if Parliament turns them down. But what he did get is a vote that says, look, if you guys at the end of the day have to put any kind of physical barrier or infrastructure in on the Irish border, Parliament gets a vote. So he's diminished the level of vote that he gets, meaning he's diminished the level of power that he gets in the process. He doesn't get the level of power up to the point of the amendment. He does get it if certain conditions are met at the end of this process. In fact, there's a physical barrier on the Irish border, if I'm being honest, would be somewhat of a deal breaker. It would break the Good Friday Agreement. Let's see. And let me read this again just so I'm understanding it. Mr. Greaves said he insisted on a key paragraph in the statement saying the government is to open the MPs to table motions and debate matters of concern, and that, as is the convention, parliamentary time would be provided for this. So here's the thing. There are two things that's being said in this. And if I'm understanding this legalese correctly, that legalese is not saying anything. I mean, ultimately, it's just saying you will provide time for us to talk about issues of concern on this issue. I mean, on matters dealing with Brexit. That's it. There's no power associated with it. It's, for all intents and purposes, wind and air equaling nothing. None of it would matter. It doesn't seem like, I guess what I'm saying is nothing in this particular statement allows any power for Parliament to do anything outside of something being a physical barrier to Northern Ireland. The only thing the statement really gives them is we get to give commentary. We get to open our mouth. We get to say shit to you. And you got to sit there and take it. But no, you don't have to do anything about it. He didn't get what he wanted. the Prime Minister gives in, but the concession seems to be insignificant for all intents and purposes. She wasn't going to put a physical barrier on the border of Ireland anyway. At least I don't think she was. I don't think she would have been able to get away with it. I think the DUP would have dumped her in a heartbeat. So it almost makes this particular thing somewhat perfunctory. Now, is that the right word for it? I mean, not perfunctory, but it makes it, I don't want to say pointless, but it's kind of pointless. Now, that's assuming that the Prime Minister comes up with something for the border. I mean, she may end up having to put a physical border there, in which case this clause kicks in. But up to that point, short of that, the Prime Minister, for the most part, gets what she wants. It's a minor concession, if I'm being honest. Theresa May wins. Now, he faced criticism for this because I think they looked at it like I looked at it and it was like, dude, you didn't get anything. I mean, the thing that you got was essentially to be able to talk shit to the Prime Minister. We get to pop our gums off at the Prime Minister on issues of import. But the Prime Minister is perfectly free to sit down and go and do something completely opposite. Like, I'm trying to make this point that she has the power in this case to do what she wants. Now, the people may veto her at the end, but ultimately the Prime Minister still has power and influence. I have a video on that conversation that was taking place on Brexit. He named the video "The Day the Parliamentary Democracy Died." Now, here's the thing. The EU, this is the residential asshole of the EU, Verhofstadt. I want to show you how he responded to this because I thought his response was utterly hilarious and gets across what is going to take place to Britain in these negotiations.
We prefer a solution that is really avoiding this border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic instead of using the backstop. So first of all, we hope that we can find a solution on that on that issue. Secondly, regulatory alignment will be a key in this, and it was not in the answer given by the British government to the European Union. And that was a key element that was missing, this regulatory alignment, because you cannot have only a customs arrangement. It needs to be accompanied by regulatory alignment, and that was missing. Three, a backstop is something that is a permanent system that is there, that you don't use, but that is, while in the reaction by UK government, the backstop was in fact proposed as a temporary system for 1 year. So I have never seen a backstop that is used for 1 year and then it disappears. No, a backstop is a fallback position that you have in your pocket, I should say, and you hope that you have never to use it. That's a backstop, in my opinion. So that was not in the proposal of the UK government, because I'm a little bit puzzled with the way how the UK government sees now that problem. If we follow their reaction on the backstop that is on the table, then it could be that there will be 3 customs arrangements in 2 years' time. The existing customs arrangement that we have now, and that will apply during the transition. Then the so-called backstop proposal by the UK, that in their proposal is limited to 1 year, to the end of 2021, and then a new system, whatever the new system will be, based on the future relationship between the EU and the UK. That means concretely that there's going to be a lot of work to do by the customs authorities of Britain if we follow that path, because they're going to have 3 different regulations to apply in 2-3 years time. So I think that that we have to avoid that absolutely. And again, I'm looking now to the white paper, or expecting that in the white paper, when the government, UK government, describes its idea of this future relationship, we will also find there some answers to the questions that that you have put forward. We have to work with what is on the table, and what was on the table was not acceptable for a number of reasons. First, the backstop was not a backstop when they proposed, because it was only temporary. Secondly, there was no regulatory alignment, so it was lacking the two main elements to be acceptable. And that's the reason that there were critical remarks by Mr. Barnier and by myself when the UK government published their proposal. I think it's still possible to have for October, November, can I say October, November, an agreement on a political declaration. But for that, we need to speed up, certainly, the negotiations.
For some reason, I don't like him. I'm not quite sure why. I've always seen him as slightly a bit of a prick. But that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's wrong. He's right. Theresa May ended up having to put a backstop in and having to put a date on it because the Brexiteers were freaking out that it was no date on it. But he's right. How do you have a backstop that has a date on it? Like, imagine the ridiculousness of this. You have an issue that you can't work out, whatever that issue is. And so you have a backstop, in which case you go through the backstop and you fall back in this fallback position. And then in a year, you're assuming that you're going to be finished in a year. What happens if you're not finished in a year? Do you have another backstop? This makes no sense. So she took a political disposition into something that made no logical sense. But purely she had to take the disposition for political reasons. He's right. That's the first point. The second point is regulatory alignment. He's right on that also. If you're going to be part of the EU, you're going to have to be in some sort of regulatory alignment with the EU. If you can't come to a deal and you're saying you're going to keep yourself in this kind of quasi-EU state, then that means you're also going to have to be in regulatory alignment with the European Union. If the European Union signs a trade deal or something to that effect, you're stuck with, again, regulatory alignment without any necessarily impact on the decisions that are made into that unit. If I'm understanding that correctly, they're going to get dragged along in their wake without having any say-so in the things that are affected within the EU itself. They have no need or want to assist Britain in this affair. Zero. You have multiple Eurosceptic countries. Slovenia has just elected a Eurosceptic government. I saw him talking to Slajov Zizek. Italy has elected a right-wing government that's Eurosceptic. And Britain has chosen to leave the EU altogether. If you're the EU, in this disposition, what do you want to do? Do you want to make an example out of Britain? Or do you want to be an easy trading partner with Britain, giving them an easy time when they're pulling their way out of the EU? I suspect that you want to be somewhat of a prick to Britain. The last thing you want to give is this impression that leaving the EU is easy because many of those other countries may think it is somewhat of an easy process to do. I got to be honest, but it's possible that the disposition of the EU is to inflict a certain amount of damage on Britain or a certain amount of penalty for Britain leaving the EU. Now, Theresa May be right in the sense of you may have to take a position of being willing to leave it all, seeing is that they may be willing to inflict a certain amount of damage on the Britain for leaving the EU. Now, that could be me being cynical and me looking at politics as being somewhat of a blood sport. They're going to coat this in all sorts of language. He was not being a prick in the way that he was coding this. But what's behind that? Do you think that there's a smiling gentleman that's pleasant, that's willing to shake his hand? If you could see in the heart of the man, and that heart of a man would get across to you what he is just based on the actions and the emotional expression that he has. Do you think that's him with a congenial smile, putting his hand out to shake the Britain and says, sorry it didn't work out, chap. We're going to do our best to make this easy for you? Or do you think this is a man who's rubbing his hands together with a devious grin, with a knife behind his back? Whatever he says, however he says it, It may be nice, it may be true, but at the same token, what's behind that is a certain degree of pain on Britain for them leaving the EU. Britain knows it. They know it in those negotiations that that's what they're going to be going into. They don't want Italy, they don't want Greece, nor do they want Slovenia or some of these other countries to get ideas about leaving. They're going to make an example. That's my thought. It could be wrong. And I'm saying this from a political standpoint, from people who I think are full on into this EU bandwagon to the degree of almost cultish about it. And if you're cultish about your political group and you want that particular political unit to stay together, what are you willing to do to keep it together? And if that means breaking a finger of an empire that's deciding, or a nation that's deciding to leave your club, would you do it? If you think it'll make the others think twice, maybe. Wouldn't be surprised. Would not be surprised. So, Britain is going into tough negotiations, and their disposition doesn't quite make sense. They're not unified at home while they're going into these negotiations. She has one of the weakest governments that I think I've ever seen in the UK, while going into tense negotiations. Is it time for a general election? Is it time for a general election? So, I'm going to end this here. Who's here? Is anybody here? Yes, good point, Nikki. Sovereignty was an issue as well, of course. Yeah, sovereignty. Let's see. Badger Damon. Oh, many have openly called for making an example of the UK. Yeah. Agreed. The EU did a great job eliminating sovereign countries' ability to control their own currency. Yes, they did. That alone makes me skeptical about the objectives of the EU. They've completely undermined the power of those countries. Life sucks, dickhead. I like that you are discerning. Well, thank you, Life Sucks, dickhead. I appreciate that you like that I'm discerning. I love the name. Propaganda. Did you scroll up through the new WikiLeaks? No, I haven't seen a new WikiLeaks yet. He says scroll up. Yeah, I haven't seen a new WikiLeaks. Tommy Robinson, not his real name, broke a sensible law and is an Islamophobe. Yes, he is. He's in jail. I saw him having a conversation with George Galloway. George Galloway ate him alive. It was one of the funniest things you've ever seen in my life. It wasn't free speech issue. It was a 3-part trial, and he put the whole thing at risk. Let's see. Trying to listen to Jamal. Two's time. Aw, thank you, Two's time. Uh-oh. Fighting over Sam Ronan. Can we talk about the real issue, James versus Ebon? I don't know who that... I know who Ebon is. I don't know who James is. Oh, James... What? Guy verse that the pride of Belgium rolling my fucking rolling on the floor laughing. I didn't say it was... Oh, somebody say it was the pride of Belgium. That guy trips me out. He's cranky as all hell. When I see him in Parliament, he's a bit of a prick. He's a bit of a prick. Crazy subject in the current year. Why doesn't anyone say Catholic phobe? I don't know who anybody is a Catholic phobe. Call it Brexit or wherever. The people aren't getting what they voted for. I don't think the people knew what they voted for, Garden. This is another example of manipulation of public perception and disregard for the democratic process. Yes, yes. Well, you can understand why, though, Garden. I mean, ultimately, look, people have this odd belief that people function on integrity. I'm sorry, they don't. They function on the incentives built into a system. If you create a system and you say that the goal of the system is to win, then winning takes priority over everything else. Other competing ideas like integrity, democracy, those things are competing ideas. The point of it is to win. I mean, ultimately, what do you want to do? Have your morals and be sitting at home, or have less and be sitting in the palace? In this case, the goal was to win Brexit. Now, you could stay with this is what Brexit is, while the other side is making shit up. In which case, you say, I have to up the ante. Well, I need to now come up with stuff. And you can imagine at a certain point, the basic concrete ideas of what it is gets lost just because of the competitiveness of the system itself. Each side ups the ante. It's almost like their nuclear bomb of sorts. And as they up the ante, the truth of it gets siphoned off more and more, until you get to a point where you're at this rarefied air that is a bare resemblance to what you were actually talking about. Having the argument purely on the ideas themselves, the people are always going to try to up the ante with regards to how they make the case that their idea is better than yours. And that battlefront ends up on all sorts of war fronts. It's not that much different than an actual war. The problem is twofold. Country matters less than winning in many of these cases. The same thing is here in our elections. Country matters less than winning. What's best for the public matters less than winning. We keep acting as if integrity is part of the process. It is not. The moment that you say winning is the point, then winning becomes the point. That's in politics, that's in business, all those. I mean, you've created a capitalistic system where we tell people to get rich or die trying, and get rich however you want to get rich. And however you get that cash, you're an honorable gent. The fact that you got the money, you're an honorable gent. What do you do to get the money at that point? We pretend as if these corporate leaders and everything else are good, humane people. Jeff Bezos is $140 billion. He should hang his head in shame walking around with that much money. His people, in some cases, are on food stamps. He has $140 billion. He's literally living off the system because instead of paying his people a fair, decent wage, the government has to subsidize him paying his workers shit and piss. Same thing for Walmart. Same thing for a lot of these places. Yeah. All I'm saying is that the longer the process goes on, just based on incentives built into the process itself, what they start to talk about deviates from the original point as they think they can get more and more advantage in different angles of the conversation. Well, at a certain point, they started talking about, immigration and all this other stuff. Well, immigration was one part of it. It wasn't the main part of it, nor did they explore the actual ramifications of it. Because let's be honest, exploring the ramifications is somewhat problematic. But yeah, the problem is with that process, when you have this kind of competitive process, you lose track of the main theme. What does Brexit mean? That was never explored. They never even had that conversation. They were so interested in winning that the whole point of what they were winning became frivolous. Besides the point. Joshua Renzo. Clyde, you got to compare apples to apples. Beanie makes more than an average citizen, but compared to other senators, it's the least. Vegan for the Planet. Clyde Illusion. Where do you get that info? Would you truly like to know, not calling you a liar? Uh-oh. What did he say? Bernie Sanders made more than $1 million in 2014, making it the second year in a row that the senator has earned seven-figure income. So what? So what? So what? What does it matter? I don't understand. Even if he made $4 million, so what? So what? What does it matter? Oh, you're trying to say because he's a socialist? Socialists can't earn millions of dollars. I don't know why a socialist can't earn $1 million. I don't see what's the issue. No, I'm not making a big deal out of anything. I'm saying, what does it matter? I'm asking, what does it matter? Like, what does it matter that Sanders has $1 million? So what? Bernie probably. So, but yeah, that's kind of my point. I don't see what that matters. Quit assuming things, Jamal. What am I assuming? I am asking you, what does it matter? What does it matter? Clyde Illusion, that's not what I said. Oh, okay. Fair enough. I could have misread. Bernie didn't have to cuck bankers to earn speech money. Doc Rossi, that's true. Was New Week's the punchline? It's not Bernie's fault. Is a maximum wage cap proposed by FDR. Socialism is not Christianity where believers have to give up everything. guys, I gotta be honest. I don't see what the big deal is about this. So what? Yeah, so what? I mean, even if it's true, so what? What does it matter? No one in the UK does either, Sherry. Nikki M. What did Nikki M say? What did Sherry say? I'm not sure I totally understand the whole Brexit thing. So I think Brexit is kind of like Trump getting elected. Britain decided they were putting it up for a referendum. Cameron decided to do it. The public, or at the very least there had been a push by some, Nigel Farage being probably one of the main people, to try to get a referendum on leaving the EU. Farage had been trying to get that referendum for God knows how long. He's been in the EU Parliament screaming about it at the height of his lungs every time he touched a mic for the past, 6 years or so. They put it up for a referendum. And at that point, it's a contest. Brexit or no Brexit. Now, the question is, you're fighting over the narrative. What does Brexit mean? To some, Brexit has a certain meaning. To others, Brexit has another. Now, in one case, you have people, immigration, races, keeping foreigners out. Like, these were some of the themes that were displayed on one theme. And on the other one, unity, staying with the EU, these other guys are racist, etc., etc. Now, the catch is, the actual topics, though, like, those issues hit close to the emotional center of people, but it didn't necessarily explore the realities of what Brexit meant. So what people were voting on was somewhat of an abstraction without necessarily knowing exactly what Brexit meant. Ultimately, as a flat fact way, it meant leaving the EU. The question becomes, how do you leave the EU? I would say, honestly, there's only one way to leave the EU. There is no such thing as a soft Brexit. This idea of a soft Brexit, that you're in this kind of regulatory alignment with the EU, means you're in regulatory alignment with the EU. If you're lining yourself up with this kind of the standards of the EU, then you haven't left. So yeah. Propaganda. Don't blame people for living in a capitalist system. Bernie doesn't empty slaves in Asia. It's different than you stumble. Wait a minute. What does this matter? You guys are still talking about this? This so doesn't matter. I'm sorry, guys. This doesn't matter. Even if Bernie Sanders made $10 million, does that in any way change anything that comes out of Bernie Sanders' mouth? It does not. I don't care. Caffeine Stew, at least Amazon has more U.S. employees than Apple. Plus, what Amazon is doing is changing a lot of how business is done. Yeah, they are, but you're saying at least. I mean, what's stopping Bezos from paying his people a decent wage? What? I mean, you're acting as if Amazon is doing people a favor by giving them a job. Here's a newsflash. Amazon, Jeff Bezos doesn't get $100 billion if Jeff Bezos doesn't have workers. And part of the problem with this idea of workers accepting something lower than what they're worth is that they have this race to the bottom in the sense of wages. It is nonsensical to me that the working class has allowed the top 1% to be the top 1%. That is nonsense. Please understand how much nonsense that is. Your society is made up of a large majority of people, whether black, white, gay, Hispanic, lesbian, straight, trans, whatever. The overwhelming majority of the people are under one economic demographic. The different identities can hate the other identities. Fair enough. That shouldn't have anything to do with what you want from the standpoint of an economic disposition. There should be a unanimity across the board from the standpoint of what we as workers are willing to accept for ourselves. They look out for themselves magnificently well. What do you think? There was enough money to pad the poor over and get rid of poverty 7 times over, just last year alone. Why do you think they didn't do it? They didn't do it because when they're giving themselves $20 million a year, that's them looking after them. They look after each other. We need to do the same for us. We are the 99%. 99%. There's certain things that we should accept. And there should be a solidarity amongst all of us. Amongst all of us. I don't care if somebody is a Trump supporter. I don't care if the person hates me. I don't care if the person says, before I even open my mouth, they said, I don't like that guy because of the way that guy looks. Don't fuck me in the ballot box. I guess I'm trying to make this point that even it's funny, blacks become pariahs when they're in the Republican Party. It's this feeling that you're fucking over your own, and having a difficult time in this country, to put it mildly. It's a feeling of you're fucking over your own. But nobody cares when whites do it. Isn't that odd? Like, people, we care when we're fucking each other over from the standpoint of a black Republican. It's there, and I think there's a racial element that's added to it that adds a certain amount of edge, because we know that they're monsters that hide in the crevices and the rocks of that other party that comes out every so often in order to make themselves known. My point in this, and my point in saying that is, nobody ever takes issue with whites fucking over whites. Why is that? And what I mean by this is whites voting for other Republicans. Like, you have poor whites who vote for Republicans. Those people are getting fucked over. Nobody says anything. But for whatever reason, when blacks do it, it's seen as pariahs. And look, I see them as pariahs too, so don't get me wrong. It's not, I'm just asking this question kind of as, I think the issue is race in this. I know that sounds weird, but I think it's true. But it goes beyond this idea of money. It goes to this thing of race. For us, there's a tinge that we know of that's in that other party that doesn't necessarily like us. Not because of anything we say, but because of who we are. And knowing that, it adds a certain amount of to it. It adds edge to that dislike. Whereas there's no racial animosity to it for whites. You just have one class fucking over another class, and that seems to be okay. Why is that okay? Why is that okay? So fucking weird. There's no solidarity among whites, but there should be. There should be a solidarity among all of us. This is kind of my point. Whether you care about the environment, and I understand to some degree this issue boils down to race. I'm not blind to that, and I don't have this belief that you can get everybody on the Republican side, because I understand some of these guys are knuckle draggers. But that's not all of them, and there are some of them that feel, I would imagine, that the Democratic Party hugs identity too closely. Now, whatever you want to think about those people for thinking that the Democratic Party hug identity too closely, whatever. That's how they perceive it. It's not necessarily wrong. They may even perceive that the Democratic Party does it just to take advantage. And that also, that I think is true. I think there's a certain degree of hypocrisy that loses you a certain momentum in certain segments of the political class. African Americans don't have two choices to vote for. We only usually have one. Because we only usually have one, we don't necessarily see the political dynamic in ways that I think whites see the political dynamic. What I mean by this is, from the disposition of somebody who's white, there are multiple parties to vote for. Ultimately, whatever happens to the country only really affects you from an economic standpoint. There is never a threat to person. There's always only just, this guy is a fucking menace and he's going to kill a lot of people, or this guy is going to, drive us into a kind of economic cliff. But the presence of mind for African Americans is different. Living under the Republican governor for us is different. Under a Republican president, it's different. There's a racial tinge to it that tends to, whether it's there or whether it's not, it's there. If that makes sense, at least from the perspective of the people who are observing that particular thing. if you're taking that disposition and you're looking at, meaning take the position of somebody who's white, who have multiple parties to vote for, and you look at two parties, one party, you see these guys are using race in order to scam for votes. You may even make the case of saying these guys are lying. They don't care about the poor at all, which may trick you into this binary choice of these guys are full of shit, the other ones are not. And maybe the other ones not necessarily are not full of shit, but at the very least these other guys are lying to me. And even if that doesn't necessarily get you to vote for the Republican, it may get you to stay home. This political process is fundamentally the same. Both of these parties are fucked. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Not being a hypocrite, representing something real and being sincere about it, I strongly suggest that this is a way towards politics. I don't know if this is a current phenomena, maybe because of video, maybe because of all the angles to which we look at people, and it makes people more people. And when they seem inauthentic, they seem very inauthentic. I don't know what it is, but it seemed recently, over the last few years, the facade of politicians have been fading away, and this phony fakeness have been given away to people wanting a certain degree of reality. So yeah. Redneck doesn't equate to a race trader the same way Uncle Tom does. Well, that's my point. Like race doesn't come into play in that scenario. The only thing that comes into play at that point is class. But class has been taken off the table for debate. So it doesn't have an edge to it when one class is fucking over another class. In fact, class is not even necessarily discussed in a weird way, because that person has white skin. He feels that he was always one notch above the other person, regardless of whether he had a dime to his name. So despite having a different class orientation, despite having a life that's completely different based on class dimensions. I mean, one person's eating steak, the other person is eating, ramen noodles. They at the very least see themselves as to some degree equal, while at the same token better than the person who may be African American and millionaire. There's no racial tinge to it. I guess I'm making this point that that's still weird. It's still strange. Like, for either party, it's still strange that they don't add. Like, I always think it's weird that Jeff Bezos can't have $140 billion without people to work for him to have $140 billion. That alone should give a certain amount of solidarity among all of us as a collective to say, yes, it is morally right and just, seeing as your wealth comes on the expense and the backs of all of the people in this particular society. Not just that, even your ability to have that wealth is purely at the behest of the people and the workers that keep this society going and keep the lights on. Yeah, there's a price for society. Pay your fair share. There should be solidarity among that. Meaning, you don't have to raise taxes on the bottom classes. You raise it on the top classes. And you start taking more aggressive action from the standpoint of making life cheaper for the people who are in the society itself. Personally, I would nationalize the rails, energy. Now, some people would make this argument, well, you don't nationalize, you just put people on a board. Fair enough, however that process is done. But my point is that money needs to go back into the community itself. And it needs to go back in a way that lowers the costs of doing business for the people in the society. Solar panels on the roofs in California is an awesome choice. That should be federally paid for. Whether that's a tax cut or whatever else, that should be federally paid for. This is what I mean when I say green energy new deal. There are things that we can do from the standpoint of the federal government. And as Congress, make the Fed slowly pay down the debt out of their earnings. There are things to be done. It's Look, I just wish there was a solidarity among the workers in this country. I just wish there was. And not so much. Yeah, high-speed rail. Honestly, and this is what gets into this idea of money. You have all the resources to do whatever you need to do. Jack Fresco used to make the argument that cash is the problem in the society. You have all the resources. Meaning, if you wanted to create a Hyperloop that went from California to New York, you have the resources to do that. You have the technical acumen to do that. You have the technical skill to do that. Do you have the cash? People put themselves in debt to do something that they have the resources, have the skill to do. Are you telling me we're not smart enough to arrange ourselves in a way where people being on the street just doesn't exist in our society? Where education, it can be done up to the max. Healthcare. Are you telling me we're not bright enough to organize ourselves in a way where, I guess you can say, the technical advances in our society can be pushed forward without this thing of cash holding it back? I know that's too far-fetched, but still. It's Fresco's argument would be, sorry, I'm getting stepped up. Fresco's argument would be, you can pretty much do that stuff, but you don't have the cash necessarily to do that stuff. The irony is, we're $20 trillion in debt. Instead of going into a war, we could have made sure everybody had all the education they wanted. Education, healthcare for free, job guarantee. Like you start thinking of the things that you could have had for $20 billion of debt, and you ask yourself, what did we use that money for? And that by itself should be a crime. I'm sorry, that should be. I don't understand the way people take some of this stuff. Like, they've squandered the treasury. They've literally squandered the treasury. They looted the treasury. Sure, I did not. Clyde, what are you talking about? I didn't jump on you. I don't think I said anything to you. I think I looked at the story and I said, so what if Sanders has $1 million? I didn't jump on you. Look back at the video. I promise you, I did not jump on you at all. That's not me jumping on you. Clyde, I wasn't jumping on you. I promise you, I wasn't jumping on you. That's why I was like, what are you guys talking about? What are you talking about? No, my only point was, even if Sanders made $5 million, so what? Who cares? I wasn't jumping on you at all. I think I repeated what you said, but I wasn't jumping on you. No, hell no. That wasn't what I was getting at all. It's all good. Keep Clyde in his place. I didn't say anything to Clyde. Jabalo was just messing with you. Blogo Pogo, Anarchist Reading Circle. We had potlucks and building a real over-engineered shed. No way. Seriously. That's awesome. That's awesome. Moshlex, check some out. You just owned him, Jamal. I did not. Edward Klein. Obama was powerless and did not empower any black people. Obama wasn't powerless. He just didn't use it. I mean, there's a difference. Like, think about it for a moment. If you're, for all intents and purposes, a Republican, and you get into office, you come up with these plans, per se. Like, for instance, the housing plan fell apart. It fell apart. Yet blacks lose their housing wealth like nobody, just fell through the floor. Protecting the banks, though. Like, throwing his body on the banks. Like, it gets across this idea of importance. Which one is important? Not paying attention to the housing program that, for the most part, fell apart and allowed African Americans to lose a ton of their wealth in this financial crash. But patting the bankers. Softly patting their bottoms. Didn't empower. He's talking about the standpoint of, I took that, and I guess everybody has their own meaning. It depends on what they mean by empower, right? So I took empower to mean, but see, I think this through the lens of economics. I think of empowerment through this thing of economic empowerment. I think economics, or a certain amount of wealth, and a capitalistic system brings a certain amount of freedom. That's the way I took it. Giving 95% of the wealth doesn't do that. It just doesn't. You damn bully Jamal. You're starting to act like Progressive Voice. That dude walks into Jamal house and just, yo. So I am on, I'm scrolling through videos on YouTube, and I see a Progressive Voice video, and it's Jimmy Dore. I'm sorry, it's Noam Chomsky, and it's going after Dore. But it's like the video is cut in a way where he's having Chomsky. It's a weird video. He's naming the video in a way where it's this incentive. It looks like he was having to go at Dore. It's so weird. So weird. PV is making some good videos this week. Really? Fair enough. Fair enough. Did Obama amplify or subdue the voice of blacks? Well, he enhanced the voice of blacks in his class. Let's say it that way. He enhanced the voice of blacks in his class. And again, I look at this stuff through the lens of economics. Like, look, to some degree, I remember I met a gentleman at one of the conferences, and he said, is it possible that we weren't ready for a black president, that black America wasn't ready for a black president? And his point in that was this idea of holding people accountable, that to some degree, because of the amount that Obama was attacked, it made attacking him, if you were African American, impossible to do. Like, many of the attacks seemed so racist and so over the top that your only real feeling was he needs to be defended. The people who are going after him are going after him in hateful, nasty ways. And so, again, he needs to be defended. Add on to that, blocking each and everything that he tried to do. Granted, they were modest. And then the sad part is, because they were Republican plans, it made them look batshit crazy, and it pushed them further off the edge. But, yeah, they were modest plans at best. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm getting stopped up. I may have to end this. Can't breathe. PV does make decent videos all the time. Noam Chomsky talking down on Jimmy Dore. That both seems to have the same opinions. It's just Jimmy is a way of voicing them a lot more caustic. Oh, I know what I was saying. There's a difference, though, in this idea of putting somebody in a position that's black versus having somebody in a position that actually represents a particular demographic. Those things are different. This is an issue of class. Is there a difference between Sanders versus is there a difference between Obama? If Sanders had got into office in 2008 with a majority in the House, a majority in the Senate, supermajority in the Senate, and a crowd at his back saying, we want change, what do you think he does in that scenario? Do you think he protects the banks? Do you think he lets homeowners go bust? Do you think he has X number of thousands of people being thrown in prison for pot? Do you think, I'm making this point to you that it's a fundamentally different presidency. He didn't take advantage of all of his opportunities. And even when he did do things, they seem half-assed. Meaning he allowed the Obamacare thing to be talked down and attacked so much and vilified that it was as if they couldn't even mount a defense for healthcare. Think about that. I remember when I was abroad and I thought, wow, he's going to pass healthcare. That's going to be a gimme. Who doesn't want healthcare? Boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong. Yeah, Ben Carson. Yeah, there's a difference. There's a difference. It depends on what you mean by empowerment. So fair enough, J. Scott. You can make an argument that people were empowered just because his face was black and theirs was black. But that's a different empowerment. I mean, that goes to this idea of sense of self. That part's true. But I'm talking about something that hits more real, that tries to change the way the system is. In fact, is for all these glorious words of hope and change, it was little to be found. So, Jay dresses up like Anna. Ooh. Well, that's funny. Sanders will piss away the voice that he has to run with the Democrats. It sucks. I don't think so. Like, you're assuming that the Sanders that you have now is the same Sanders that you have when he's running in an election. I don't know why you're assuming that. I think if he runs as a Democrat, you're making the point that he's going to dumb down or he's going to tone down his policies. Why would he do that? He's out here now calling for federal jobs guarantee, college, increase the Social Security, removal of forces out of Syria. I don't know why. Like, if he's running as a Democrat, he's already put these policies out. He's never shied away from the policies, and if anything, he's going further to the left as Democrats have moved further to the left. He's taking the opportunity to, well, you guys have inched over, I'm moving over. So anytime Kamala Harris or Cory Booker sticks their toe a little further, okay, I'll do a Medicare for all now. Sanders is like, great, let's do a federal jobs guarantee. And they're like, fucking socialists. Fucking socialists. Bernie was thrown off his own stage. He was not. If Bernie runs and wins as a Democrat, he will kick ass. Sherry Specter. Sherry, I agree with you on this. Do you guys remember when I first started? I made this argument. I said, if Sanders runs as a Democrat, there's a path. It doesn't mean he'll hit it, but there's a path. And there's the first path that I've seen in a long time for somebody that's to the left. I have no path in my recent memory for somebody that was to my left to end up either in the presidency or in the main slot of government. Well, that's changed. There's a chance. You have the most popular politician in this country, hands down. His up and downs against Trump are through the roof. He just needs to make it through a Democratic primary. That's where the knives come out. But that being said, he's going to go into that Democratic primary as a favorite. He could do it. He definitely could do it. Sanders' cabinet would be incredible. PD, I think the same thing. I also think the same thing. Bernie or guillotine 2020. Choose your revolution. Fucking hate. I love that. Bernie or guillotine. Bernie or guillotine 2020. And by the way, if he runs as a Democrat, understand what takes place from the standpoint of the DNC. And the same way third way Democrats were able to come into office and change the power dynamic of the party, that happens again. Part of the reason they've been fighting so hard to keep Sanders out is because it fundamentally changes the power dynamic that's in the party itself. It doesn't mean that you completely obliterate third way Democrats. But the person who's chosen in power, the person who chooses, I guess you can say, the leadership positions of the DNC itself, those things change. Personally, I would have a purge, but that's just me. I'm an asshole. And I hold grudges and I have scars from 2016. So, I'm not the one that's part of it, though. We worked out, Obama has completely different priorities. Yeah, a little more than functionary. He allowed circumstance to shape him to such an extent to preclude leadership. See, or you can make the case, Gardner, that that's just who he was. I mean, look, if he wanted to pass the Obamacare, what would he have wanted to do with Obamacare? I don't know. He seems to be less interested in it and more essentially, look, just pass healthcare. As opposed to, I want healthcare and I want healthcare done right. Hey, let's take this right-wing plan and run with it. I don't want you to take a right-wing plan. Fuck the right-wing plan. I don't want you to do that. Joshua Renshaw, if Bernie wins in 2020, what cabinet would you accept? Oh, man. I don't think I want a cabinet. I don't think I want to be a part of it. Or unless it's some kind of political advisor or something like that. But he's not going to have me as political advisor. McCain is a loser. McCain is a warmonger. And yeah. Joe Holiday, Trump cut rich people taxes, free lunch for the rich. Yes. Yeah. Press secretary. No, I don't want to be in front. I would definitely prefer to be behind the scenes telling him to, spy on somebody's office and get secret files. Yeah. I'd be the guy who'd be like, look, you need to do this, and this in order to hit him in the knees. It's like a campaign rally and having somebody to ask some weird and horrible questions, or paying somebody to, I would be horrible as I would be an asshole as a campaign person. I'd be horrendous. To me, it would all be chess. Deep State Thomas, yes, Deep State Thomas is right. No more stupid ass sanctions. I think Jamal C. Harlan St. Clair. Yeah, well, see, that I don't know. I mean, the Sanders is still subject to political whims. I mean, he's shown no impetus at all to essentially push back on this idea of Russian hacking elections and everything else. He's gone with the political winds. So the political winds has sanctions on Russia. He may keep sanctions on Russia. So I don't know. Bernie has a few $1 million from book sales. Why try to make earnings a thing? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's because he's a socialist and then he's getting money, and for some reason a socialist is not supposed to get money. I don't know. Would you be President Sanders' anger management translator? I don't think Sanders needs an anger management translator. I think Sanders can flip out with the best of them. Badger Damon, Alex Jones was saying Trump only ever intended one term. Sweet. Then he says that's assuming he can leave the country in the hands of Pence and Haley. Oh my God, so you're all stuck with Trump. Oh, Jesus Christ. Pence and Haley is terrifying. That is completely terrifying. Pence by itself is a terrifying prospect. Because he'd go to sleep. Like, the public will utterly go to sleep. He looks like somebody's grandpa, even though he's doing the same things as Donald Trump would be doing in that office. And then when you say something to him, he just shakes his head gingerly. In that debate, when he was going against, I think it was Tim Kaine was trying to stick him with each and everything that Donald Trump has ever said. And he would just sit there and just head wiggle. And do you know he got out that debate with pretty decent marks, considering that you're trying to clean up after Donald Trump? Look, whatever you want to say about Pence, that's a certain amount of political acumen, using his talents, looking like somebody's grandpa in order to do really hateful, nasty shit, and getting away with it in a debate. So that is a terrifying prospect to be on stage. That also somewhat changes the dynamic in the race. Trump is the weakest duckling in the history of ducklings. If he runs again, he's going to get crushed. At least I think so. Depends on who the Democrats run. If they run somebody who's some kind of corporatist hack, or if they cheat Sanders, it's a wash. They're going to lose. Yeah. Tim Kaine lost the debate to someone who literally said and did nothing. Yeah, he did. So you remember that debate. If Democrats fear Trump, negative 30%, just wait until they face Pence's 3%. Exactly. Like, they lost to reality show hosts. Like, he was the most hated person in politics ever. Understand what I'm saying. There was nobody else more hated in politics than Donald Trump. On the day that he was elected, 60% of the population thought he was unfit to be president. They thought he was incompetent. And yet he still beat the stuffing out of Clinton. God, that's embarrassing. God, that's utterly, completely, painstakingly, debilitatingly, knee-weakingly embarrassing. All right, I'm going to end this. It's been over an hour, and there was a few other stories I wanted to get to that I'm probably not going to get to tomorrow. But thank you guys. It's Saturday on a weekend, so you guys are sitting here with me, so I appreciate you guys being here with me. I'm going to hang out with my wife for a little bit. Her stomach is a little off after a sandwich. It's like that cow is getting revenge on us. But she's not feeling well, so I'm gonna check on her. But look, guys, thank you guys for showing up and hanging out with me and ending up on Sanders, but starting off at the Queens, at the across the pond. Yeah, Pepto-Bismol, pretty much. Jamal reads super chat and ignores red ones. I do not. Joshua, I missed the stream, so have nothing to add. So here's some Tank, who came to make sweet love, not me. Who came to kiss and hug, not me. Who came to beat it up. Call me Rocky. Don't use your hands to put up that gate and stop me. What? What? I missed the stream, so I have nothing to add. So here's some Take, who came to make sweet love, not me. Who came to kiss and hug, not me. Who came to beat it up. Call me Rocky. Don't use your hands to put up that gate and stop me when we fuck. Oh man. Oh, the best part about this is the last part. He said, who came to make sweet love, not this guy. Who came to kiss and hug, not this guy. Who came to beat it up. Call me Rocky. That's awesome. That's awesome. That is awesome. Who came to beat it up. Balthazar, it's 8 o'clock on Saturday. The regular shills shuffle in. The Democrats just go hurdle in Congress. Ever so sure Harris will win. Hashtag Piano Dems. Yeah, I don't think Kamala Harris has a name recognition of a Sanders. Here's the thing. Kamala Harris might be known just from the news circles, but I don't think they know her. I think it's like John Kerry running against George Bush. Does the rest of the public know who John Kerry is? Or is John Kerry just one of those names that people who are in the Beltway know? Like if I went to my mom and asked her, who's Kamala Harris, would she be able to tell me who she was? I don't think so. Meaning, the chances of her pulling this off is Sanders or guillotine 2020. That's all I'm going to say. Sanders or guillotine 2020. That's where I'm at. PD, thanks Jamal. Oh, thanks P. Thanks to Jamal. And thanks your wife for standing by you and encouraging you to do your thing. Yeah, we both try to encourage each other to do their thing. She does her medical coding thing, and I try to back her up on that. And we've had difficult times in the transition between what I was doing and this. It wasn't always the most elegant stance, but we made it. I mean, our biggest thing was beforehand when I was working, I would work like 8 hours. And then I would come and do this for like 5 or 6 hours. Well, you can imagine that gets old real quick, especially when you're spending like, hours. Like you've been at work all day and then you go home and you're there all day. And so stuff is not getting done in the house. And for the most part, you're in your thing. And it's somewhat exclusive. When I first started doing the videos, my wife would hang out with me when I did the videos. But at a certain point, I started just doing them on my own because you couldn't necessarily expect her to hold the camera and all this other stuff. And I would jury-rig the camera so it would be up and I would try them. Then I would eventually got a camera. And then I started using a cell phone. Then a camera. It was just a propagation. But, there were times where she would get pissy or annoyed that I was spending so much time in the room doing news or doing videos. But I think at a certain point, she realized I loved it. Like, it's like you're in a situation for a while where you hate what you're doing. You hate it. I always found this stuff to be pointless. It's like you're giving somebody tons of cash, like plutocrats. And all of your labor is, for the most part, going to something else. To make somebody else magnificent amounts of profit. And I think when I first started the job, it was okay, but it started to drift into this area where I hated it. And so when I started doing videos, it was this, I like this. It was just this kind of, expression. I like it. This stuff on my chest, I want to get it off. Well, somewhere along the way, this became 5 hours a day. And then somewhere along the way, you look up and you're like 8 months in, and this thing that you were doing kind of just for shits and giggles has now become a thing. It's not just a thing, it's a thing that you feel somewhat connected to, and you even feel that it's somewhat of a job. Meaning, you feel like you have somewhat of a responsibility to get up in the morning, a responsibility to do XYZ. And when you come home from work, you have other work to do. That gets tiring at a certain point. And she got to the point of feeling left out of the process. At a certain point, though, I think she started to realize this is more than just a hobby. You know, it's not like you're just playing Scrabble or dominoes. You're actually doing something that you love to do. And somewhere along the way, I think she started seeing this seems to be looking like a part-time thing. Is it possible he can grow this into something that he actually loves, as opposed to doing something that he doesn't necessarily like all that much? And so she stuck with me for the year. You know, like, she didn't, there were times where she might have been in her feelings or annoyed, but for the most part, yeah, she stuck by me with it. She really did. I mean, even in making this kind of transition where it's doing this more, yeah, it's a transition. It's weird, but it's a transition. This conversation reminds me of the episodes of Star Trek. Discuss. You know, it's funny though. I was thinking of having a Star Trek episode where I question the captain's prerogative. What should the captain do? And allow the comments at the bottom to essentially explain what the captain should do. Maybe even allow call-ins to explain what should the captain do in a scenario. I give what I think the captain should do. You guys give your takes on what the captain should do in a situation. I'm enamored by that because that gives you all sorts of episodes and all sorts of exploration in regards to consequences and repercussions of the decisions that are taking place on these epic and grand scales. Fucking love the idea. Fucking love the idea. I'm not sure the first one, but I love that idea. Absolutely love that idea. So yeah. Old Star Trek or new Star Trek? Oh, next, either one. Like, I like both. I like the original series, Next Generation. Actually, I like all the Star Treks. I mean, Discovery is a little weird. You know, in the first episode, she attacks her captain. That's just, it's like, what the fuck? I can't think of any episode. I know Spock attacked Kirk, but he was only, upon far. It wasn't just some randomly attacking the captain. That's just not done. Like, look at the relationship between the captains and the number ones on Star Trek. It's tender. Friends. Like, number one and Captain Picard are close. They're extremely close. Would you ever consider Riker attacking Picard? You could never fathom that shit. It will never happen. Riker would soon cut off his own hand first. Same thing with Spock and Kirk. Now, yes, if Spock, is in his mating cycle and he needs some, ass or grass, he's dangerous. But under normal circumstances, not so much. He's probably the best person to have around you. I'm just making the point. Even under Next Generation, or not Next Generation, Voyager, Chakotay was part of the Marquis. They were like a terrorist organization. Even he became one of, again, a tender relationship between Janeway and Chakotay. Archer and DePaul, same thing. So yeah. Oh, I did not know that. Does not want more Danny Knapp. What? Holiday isn't necessarily the guy who starts out smearing burning winds up a total racist asshole. Oh, maybe he is that way. If the USA was 90% black, there would be no problems. I don't know what that means. That's more funny than anything else, for being honest. There's worse racist guys. Yeah, I think everyone is racist. Totally. Totally. I say racist stuff all the time to my wife, but we love people. So I don't have and I'm totally joking when I say this stuff. My wife and I gotta be honest, if there was a camera on my wife and I, people would be horrified. And it's not that we say anything real. I mean, all of us are fair game. We even talk about ourselves. And it's almost in that commonality of being racist. It's all fair game. It would have no problems like Somalia. Here's the thing. Blacks aren't, any more moral or righteous than anybody else. We're just people. Same thing as, I don't think anybody is more moral and righteous or upstanding than anybody else. I mean, ultimately, you have certain societies. You have certain economic disparities. All these differences. Yes, people are somewhat different. But even within those differences, those things are in the spectrum. It's not like, somebody's off the fucking reservation. Ultimately, how your society is determining factor more so in how those people turn out. At least that's what I think. Yeah. You have a society where people are poor, living on the street, stressed out, going from pillar to post just to make ends meet. Then yeah, you're going to have a drug-addicted, opioid society where people die young, drink a lot, smoke a lot of blow, and yeah, pretty much. You might know the original sin. Yes. That's more of a colonization thing. I know what you mean, but I don't know if but that's not because they're white. If that makes sense. It's not a factor of their skin color that they're doing it. It's that they're horrible fucking people that they're doing it. There's a difference in those things. I know the skin color is associated with it, but that's because they had a certain competitive advantage that they've been able to expand upon and use that in order to dominate. You have certain cultural factors that push people to behave in certain ways. For them, that's the way they behaved. That's the way they developed, and they were able to use that development and that edge in order to dominate, just like other cultures prior had used it to dominate. We just live in a time period where they were able to dominate. I don't know if that's indicative. I severely doubt that's a principle of whiteness, seeing as you have all sorts of colors around the globe that commits atrocities. So, just saying. Just saying. Alright, I'm going to end this. I said I was going to end this prior. Jamal quote, we have a fucking racist in the White House. But that's not me thinking everybody. That's very specific, by the way. That's very specific. Is John Bolton a reptilian? John Bolton is a fucking maniac. That's what I think. That's what I think. So, I am going to end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support through Patreon. And guys, thank you very much. Joshua Renshaw, Life Sucks Dickhead, that name trips me out. Joshua Renshaw, again, Beltazar, and Pete D. Good looking out, guys. I appreciate it. And I will I'm going to have one on Star Trek at some point, probably tomorrow. So I will see you guys then, maybe later tonight, but probably not until tomorrow. So thank you guys for showing up. You all have a good night. Thanks, guys.